We are live. Thanks everybody for joining today's thought leadership panel on evolution of the cross-border payments. Payment industry has gone through a sea change in last 5 to 10 years. And we have seen that not only in one geography, but almost in every country. And thanks to blockchain, AI, ML that have acted as fuel to fire. And this change, this transformation is not stopping here. This industry continues to evolve every day, every year at a very rapid speed. And that's why we are very excited to have this thought leadership panel on evolution of the cross-border payment in the next 10 years. This is Pankaj Gupta from EthAum Venture Partners. We are a deep tech accelerator and fund based in Singapore with approximately 90 startups in our portfolio. These startups do come from different geographies, sectors, including BFSI, Industry 4.0, supply chain, retail, real estate, and so on and so forth. We are hosting this panel with Steamchain, which is one of our portfolio startups that we onboarded in January 2023. Steamchain solves cross-border payment issues for most of the logistics, supply chain businesses. I have Scott and Dan with me, who are founders of Steamchain, dialing from PST time zone. And they are going to have some really exciting conversation with our extremely diverse panel. When I talk about a panel, our panelists are from India, from Dubai, and from Nigeria. Our panelists have huge experience in the banking space, in the fintech space, as well as in the VC space. And that's why this discussion is going to be extremely insightful and interesting. Now, without further delay, I would request Scott to do a brief introduction of himself and Steamchain. And then I would request our panelists to do a brief introduction of themselves. And then we will dive into the panel discussion. Scott?
Good morning. Well, at least for my time zone. Pankaj, thanks for having us. And we're really excited to be here. So Scott Brown, COO and co-founder for Steamchain, along with my co-founder and our CEO, Dan Biggs. As you said, over the last number of years, there's been just a dramatic shift and a change in regards to not only the focus on payments, but technology that's availed itself to be able to tap into, which we've done. In looking at the marketplace, looking at technology, we've architected a solution that really, as you stated already, solves that problem of it takes time, it takes effort, there's a high cost, and it's troublesome to process global payments and transactions. And we bring that decoupled solution to the marketplace, and we're currently scaling on a global basis to be able to enable companies from a B2B perspective. So we're excited to talk a little bit more about that, unpack what we've done, the technology behind it, and what our clients are enjoying from a value proposition perspective. So thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Now I would request Sanjay to do a brief intro.
Yeah, hi, Pankaj. Sorry. Myself, Sanjay Saxena. I am in the payment space for last 20 years, presently with Paytm, and I was CFO with NPCI, National Payments Corporation of India, the entity which set up the entire retail payment in the country. And before that, I was with Aadhaar, UIDI, the entity for setting up the entire Aadhaar in the country with Nandan, So last 20-25 years in the payment space, and there have not been, never have been so exciting a space in the payments and its use cases, when the infrastructure spaces, or I say digital infrastructure, are in place. And so nice to have you all, and we'll have a fruitful discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Sanjay. I think you have this extra capability to choose the right spaces, right projects at the right time. First Aadhaar and then Paytm. And both of them are hugely, widely successful, right? So fantastic to have you on the panel today. Rizwan?
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So my name is Rizwan Kazi. I've been in payments industry for the last 23 years. I would say financial services. I started my career with Citibank in the US. from 1997 to 2004. 2004, I moved to Central Eastern Europe just before the financial crisis. Then in 2010, I moved to the Middle East just before another financial catastrophe that was supposed. So unlike Sanjay, I've been at the right place, maybe at the wrong time, supposedly to take advantage of the shifting momentum in this space, because everywhere I went, the regulation just came in, making things even more difficult. So, but I've had my experience sort of spans around across cards, payments, remittances, cross-border remittances and payments. I spent 2.5 years with a fintech called TerraPay, which specializes in real-time remittances across the globe. So I'm really excited to be part of this panel and learn from, Gaurav, from Sanjay, obviously look at what Scott and Dan are doing in this space and ask some of the obvious questions to make things exciting for the panel and for the audience also. But I think it's, as Scott said in his sort of intro, I think the payment space is evolving. I think the demand side from a consumer perspective is changing. The speed at which the technology is trying to catch up is fantastic. But at the same time, the regulation and compliance is also making things more very, very interesting. And when it comes to cross-border payments and remittances, it's all about compliance. So I think I'm really looking forward to sharing my sort of experience in this space, and having worked in like 6 different countries across 3 different continents. I hope to balance the opinions on this panel.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Rizwan. I think we should have a separate chat because I also have similar kind of story at the right places at wrong timings, but that's a separate thing. Zubril, may I request you to do a brief intro, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hello, my name is Jibril Adiojo, the co-founder and COO at SME Funds Capital, an impact investment firm in Nigeria, but we serve businesses across Africa. I'm also the co-founder of a clean tech company called 1 Watt Solar, focused on sustainable energy, blended with a bit of fintech as well. So my background is banking. Banking, investment banking, commercial banking, retail, corporate finance, and all that. So it'll be nice I'm very, very happy to be part of this conversation, and look forward to the value I could add to the portfolio companies and see how we can support them and their business. But for me, what is critical is, yes, to raise money is very important. But what is more important is the value that the companies are creating. So, and bootstrapping is very, very important. So I always say that to all the founders that we work with, that these are critical times. And these are times where valuations now are not what it was like 2 years ago, so there's correction in the market, so pretty much now is about, setting the right price, having the right product, adding the right value to the customers, and also trying to build what I always say, a platform business model. So a model where you have a flagship product.
I think there's an issue with Zubril's network. Well, Zubril, I think we lost you for 10 to 15 seconds, but it's really interesting to see what VC perspective.
I think he's back, Pankaj.
Zubril?
Yeah, I'm back now, but yeah, my network just froze for a second. Yeah, I was just saying I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to the conversation of this panel and adding value to your portfolio companies. That was my concluding remark. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Zubril. Again, it will be fantastic to hear the VC perspective on the industry. And I know 2020, 2019, 2021 were crazy times when every startup, even retail supply chain startups, were trying to pose themselves as fintech startups to raise funds quickly. So I know those times are sort of gone, and we are in 2023 now, but yeah, it would be really exciting to hear your thoughts. Last but not the least, Gaurav, please.
Hey, Pankaj. So good morning, good evening, and good afternoon if everybody's in that time zone. Probably good afternoon next. My name is Gaurav Mohan, and I would like to thank Pankaj and his colleagues, and Madhu, thank you for having me here. And thank you. I'd also like to welcome my co-panelists, Sanjay, Riz, and Jabril. And Scott and Dan, thank you so much. I see what you guys have done in terms of the payments, and I'm really excited about this, not just about what you've done, but I think now I know where you'll be coming from. So it's really interesting. I have about 19, 20 years of experience in various phases, right? So I'm born and raised a banker. I've worked with local banks and global banks, such as, Axis Bank and Development Bank of Singapore and HSBC. I co-founded a startup in San Francisco, which is more on the IoT side of things. And you'll see some of those flavors as I kind of discuss the payments world. And then kind of pivoted myself into more on the financial side of things with crypto and blockchain, and how that marries with the traditional or the fiat world. And so I think my experience has always been about growth. My experience has always been about sustainable growth. And when you think about growth and when you think about sustainable growth, it all talks about value to the stakeholders. And when I think about stakeholders, I'm not just thinking about, investors on one side and, shareholders on the other side and customers on the other and the third side, because payments or transactions, in other words, is a very basic tool that everybody needs, right? And if I were to just take a step back and just walk outside my house and see the people and just think about what those transactions are and what they're paying, being 20 years in the industry, I have to really look at myself as to how I am adding value to that. And that's the kind of driving force of what I always have at the back of my mind when I kind of come to these panels or go to my work or, talk to my customers as to how we can make things better. 20 years ago, things were in a certain way. Problems, according to me, are pretty much the same. We'll talk about that, but we need to make them slightly better as things are getting more and more, I would say, flavorful. And blockchain now coming in, and ML and AI on the other side. I do believe we have a fantastic one, and I'm really looking forward to it. Back to you, Pankaj and Scott.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav. Obviously, from banking setup to blockchain ecosystem like Ripple, and now in the fintech ecosystem, you have a very interesting, varied experience. So we are really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the questions, exciting, sizzling, hot questions that Scott is going to ask. Scott, you have huge responsibility on your shoulder. The questions have to be good. Awesome, right?
Right.
It's all about the delivery.
Before we get started, let me make a quick overview comment. And I wanted to acknowledge what Jabril brought up about bootstrapping, and to give you all a little bit of a context before we get into the questions that Scott is going to moderate. When we did the analysis, and my background, by the way, is from a business and entrepreneurial perspective. So I bring a different sort of set of lens and eye to the problem. And because I had done a very large startup over in Kuala Lumpur, and I had lived around the world in Germany and Japan and worked in both of those countries, I was aware of the problems of cross-border payments. And I thought that technology could actually solve the problem. And I said, well, I need to be able to really analyze the marketplace and pull together a team that could help execute this vision that we had. And it became evidently clear that we needed to come to the market with a platform that actually worked and solved the problems, rather than going to the market and to investors and saying, hey, we've got this great idea. So Scott and I spent a lot of time on the bootstrapping, and Jabril, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And we put all of our human capital and our real capital into building the platform, getting it up so that we could actually go to the market and have a conversation with experts like you that can help us grow the business. So I just wanted to give that context before we launched off into the questions, which I'm very, very excited to participate and to hear what everybody has to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Scott.
All right, perfect. So the most exciting part, the meat, if you will, of this entire conversation, now we'll just kind of dive in. So we've got a series of questions, as Pankaj has alluded to, and I'll walk us through those. I'd like to start, Riz, if you don't mind, start with you with the first question, and then we'll kind of provide the opportunity for the other three panelists to weigh in as well and have a dynamic dialogue about your perspective and point of view on the following questions. So the first one, without further ado, what are the most painful challenges that payment or FX leaders are really concerned about in today's world? And then,
Scott, like I said in my opening remarks, I think it's the compliance that is the most worrying and the most important thing when it comes to payments and cross-border payments. Now, over the last few years, we've seen the P2P space grow tremendously. Payments being swift, no pun intended, is not really that seamless, right? Real-time payments, you have the schemes that are well equipped to support the real-time payment capabilities, but then you have a problem of about 2.1 billion unbanked, undocumented individuals around the world who are mobile, who are working in gig economies, who are working in odd jobs, who are sending 70 to 80% of their income earned in the country of residence back home to the low middle income countries to support their families. Now, the expectations from that customers, that sort of segment, like Gaurav also said, we sometimes have to look internally to see what the problem really is. And do I face the same issue as a common person does? Or am I, because I'm in banking or in payments, am I privileged to know the ecosystem so I can, sort of play in the peripherals or play the system? So I think compliance is one. Second thing is, I think the whole idea of connectivity and lowering the cost of transactions. We can talk about, problems in the cross-border and payments, universe. Three basic instances or issues that I personally have experienced. One is obviously liquidity. Real-time payments are not really real-time unless you have downstream funding in the host countries, which requires, again, the SWIFT channel of payments. Now, transaction costs are a variable to consider, because otherwise you're not going to be able to impact the second element of cross-border payments, which is the cost of the payment. Now, if you look at B2B space, I was reading something earlier this morning, the cost of transaction is still between 6.5% to 11% of the amount. Now, if you're a large corporate or a multinational who is well connected globally and you have payments to be made, you're quite privileged to be working with a global institution, corresponding banks, and taking care of your payments. Or if you're a small, medium enterprise, which is in many developing and emerging markets, it's 60 to 70% of your GDP drivers. Their supply chain has to be, is impacted when payments are not made on time. If payments are expensive, their margins are reduced, which directly impacts the consumer because it creates inflation. And of course, the whole cycle starts again. And the third piece is really, again, related to compliance, but it's knowing your consumers, knowing your sender and your beneficiary. I've experienced exceptions after exceptions, and I'm sure you'll face it as you start this journey. When you start looking at different markets and the compliance requirements, you start understanding that, ISO standards 8583, 222, what do I use? What do I don't use? Does my terminating partner have a specific set of exceptions I can apply for so I can do the business in that country? Or do I really need to provide the street address and the mobile number of the sender and beneficiary or not? So I think these three things, liquidity, managing the cost, and then managing the information and the messaging, are probably the three areas that I think are important for anybody in cross-border payment space today. Thank you, Scott.
fantastic. Other panelists, would you like to comment or share your perspective?
I can jump in real quick. So I love what Riz kind of brought up from a compliance standpoint, and I'd like to kind of just take a step back and look at payments in different ways, right? From a problem set standpoint. So payments inherently, like if we look at, fees is still high, we know SDG goals are there, interest rates or, the rates on the margins, that's to tracking. You mentioned SWIFT, and now there is Ripple, and then there is API, and, all sorts of things. Identification, Benny and the, and the receiver, Benny and the sender. Talk about KYC and fraud problems on that side. And then, fifth is the speed. So if you look at payments in itself, like these are the problems. Let's take another step, add a little bit more to it, right? You add the crypto angle to it now, right? So now we have crypto payments, which are kind of moving cross-border. Now you add another angle to it, which is the crypto to fiat bridges that are becoming more and more prevalent. So now that's another set to KYC and compliance and regulate two very different places, right? In the cross-border sense of things. And then if you want to go a step further, you add the bank frauds, the bank failures. We just saw what really happened with the shutdown of SVB, right? Everybody, including my own business, we had a little bit of an impact. Not that we were directly dealing with them, but it's a ripple effect. It's the Herstat risk, which we as bankers know about. Having the cascading effect on interest rates. So that's just the payments part of it. Let's look at another challenge, right? Moving it, the size of the payment. We were talking about $1 payment to a cent payment. When I go walk in the London tube, I'm using my card issued here in Dubai to make that, less than 1 GBP payment or a couple of cents over the tube. What does that cost, right? So it ranges from that to, the oil payments, the trade settlements, which is $1 billion payment, right? So the size and scale of payments is also very important in terms of the challenges when we look at it. And there's no one size fits all, right? We got to slice and dice this whole pie to look at the problems. So there are problems in that as well. Again, it relates to speed, connectivity, and so on and so forth. The other problem that I always, and when I say I mean we, always come across is the geopolitics side of things, right? We have those axes created, the Western world and the Russia and the Iran and all those words, right? Really, we're not looking at a globe right now when we look at payments industry as a whole. So geopolitical issues also kind of come in and create another set of challenges for companies such as ours, the fintechs and banks, to have any kind of, how do we bridge these things? Not everybody is a thief. Not everybody's out there to game the system. There are good people out there, and we need those. The other way I want to look at is the standards. I do not think there is one global standard, or even there can be one global standards, right? There are so many different protocols, like the SWIFT, the GPI, the federations, now you add crypto, the RC20, and God knows what all. Like there are so many of them. Which ones do you adhere to? How many can you adhere to? Right? So that poses a big problem to not only the providers, the consumers, but also all the participants. Add that to the purpose of the payment. Right now we have another set of payments, like worker payments was spoken about, like trade payments I spoke about, corporate payments we were speaking about, disbursements we were speaking about. We all heard about the big fight between the Amazon and the Visas, like from a cross-border standpoint, what is going on. We're talking $110 billion, wallet size over there, wherein that's the interchange, which is at a question, and that's the kind of money that we guys are talking about. Those are some of the other things, right? And now you add that back to the CBDC efforts, which are kind of coming around 60 countries in the world. Now, how does that going to look like? How do we plug in the local schemes into these global schemes, into this other schemes, and what is the opportunity for the players to kind of manage and navigate through that? So payments in itself is a very broad topic. And at each point of these topics, we need to kind of think about the compliance side of things, as Riz was talking about, the bootstrapping of things, which Jibril was talking about, in the local Rails part of it, how will local participants participate in that? And what does it mean for who? So yes, 20 years, while the problems are still the same, but I think the market has really moved to the next level and the next level. I'm really excited about, how this will pivot to newer solutions, wherein we will not be even calling these, payments as a whole. It's just a transaction. How are you going to do a transaction? That's the question we need to ask, and that's the question we want to answer for each other. So that's just kind of my opening statement and some of the problems that I see from different, lenses, I would say. Back to you, Scott.
I think that, yeah, no, I think that was a great compliment to Riz's perspective on this, that essentially, the world is smaller now. And it's no longer, just the banks and, processing traditional payments. It's technology that's changing the landscape, it's complexity, it's regulation, and the geopolitical overlay on that just adds another sense of challenge, if you will. So I think that's, it's a great perspective. Jubal, do you have a thought that you'd like to share on that as a compliment before we move on to the next question?
For now, no. You can proceed. Thank you.
I think Sanjay wanted to add a comment here.
Yeah, Sanjay, please.
Yeah, so I'll just add to what Gaurav has said. There is no one size fit for all solution. That's very, very pertinent in this discussion. See, any payment system has to be scalable, right? Has to be interoperable. It has to achieve a the scale or to really solve the solution. And to that, the major issue comes is the design part, right? How it designed, right? In the cross-border, in our subsequent discussions, we'll discuss in the cross-border transactions, if the entire chain, or if it is a multilateral cross platforms, or if it's instant settlement platforms, if if it is split between the local transaction and the cross-border transaction, that is the area where it will take it can be scaled up, without, see, the whole design part of messaging part, my co-panelists have said that 222 and all those messaging standards, whether it has to be a greenfield approach, very difficult to do it. It has to be just a add-on kind of a thing on the existing the instant payments which are there in roughly about 60 countries. I would just like to add, I think the World Bank and the CPMI has identified about some 19 or 20 parameters, with a strong focus on harmonizing the regulatory framework, aligning operational practices, which is very important, and experiment new technologies, including CBDC, and also linking their real-time payment system in a way that in the next 5 to 10 years, this could address the fundamental issues of speed, cost, and traceability. That's very important, the traceability part, which lead us to compliance part. And I'm optimistic that while I'm optimistic, however, I would like to raise caution, particularly about the design and the technology, which will be a great significance for any future progress. And when we say that there will not be any one size fit for all, see, in the cross-border, if you see, there is a B2B MSME, section where the priority is on the reach or on the, the geography where it can be. Whereas in e-commerce section, e-commerce transaction, the priority would be the speed of the authorization, how fast I get the authorization. That's very important. So in a different use cases, the priority is the different. And accordingly, the solution have to be according to the user's requirement. As Gaurav has said, if I go out, I see how many use cases are there.
No, it's a great perspective. Appreciate that. And what's interesting is that some of these comments are leading into the presentation on our own platform that we'll be able to share what we've done that aligns with many of these comments, which is terrific. So we didn't issue any payments to anybody to say what they said. I'll just put that out there. So let me transition to the next question here as we move along. And Jibril, if I might start with you. What are the innovations and new solutions in the payment space that you're most excited about? Maybe just today, but also maybe as you look to the next year or two.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that question. For me, is what other solutions can complement payments? And if I look back to, well, Alibaba, that's 20 years, more than 20 years. Payments e-commerce was really the flagship product that the company used to really penetrate or enter the market. And there was a time where China opened its market to the entire world, right? So every order or every SME or small business or big company in China had a small online shop, on Alibaba. And the moment that was activated, the next thing Alibaba did was to implement Alipay. And if you properly dissect what Alipay does, is a massive bank that has investment products, that has credit products, that has credit score products, insurance products, everything. And the reason why that is so very nice is because with payments, you are also able to monitor the behavior of your customers, either a small business, a large business, or even an individual. The same model is also what Square did, now called Block, founded by Jack Dorsey. It started with a small device that could enable SMEs or small businesses to receive, to use credit card to make their payments, right? And once that was done, the next thing they did was to opt for a banking license in America. And instantly, it started to roll out investment and credit products, right? So there's so much value in that. So, and that is where bootstrapping also comes in, right? Is, okay, I've been able to penetrate this market. What other products can I bring in? Credit score, all those things are very, very important. And the good thing is that there are a lot of use cases that people have done so. In Africa, for example, very few so-called fintech companies do this, right? And every other tech company wants to be a fintech. And when I ask them, what are you about? Oh, just for us to be a switch for payments. And I ask them, what other thing can you do? So that understanding is not yet clear. And then we have a lot of so-called VCs just pouring money into the ecosystem without asking all these questions we're debating right now. That also has to do with bootstrapping, just to really tease out value creation from these companies, not to run after ramping up valuation, by VCs that we don't even know where they come from, probably from the cryptocurrency boom, right? So all those things are very, very important. But unfortunately, in the last 2 years, a lot of money went into the fintech space and a lot of ideas were being funded, and people that had the money were placing the price tag on those companies. And then now they want to do an IPO. The real investors are coming to the conversation and they say, nah, this is not how it's done. So bootstrapping is very important. That is integral from the first seed or pre-seed investment, even to the level of Series A, Series B. So, and that's what we try to do in our own company. We try to form that relationship with the founders, to understand their psychology, to understand their businesses. And we always say something to ourselves. We like to invest in companies that if we're not investing, are we going to be willing to also operate such business? If the answer is yes, then we also go ahead and invest so that we can really add value to all these companies. And so that is what I really want to, and the final point is this. And you were talking about cross-border payments and the fact that the entire world is small. No, we also have a lot of Africans migrating to Western world in Canada, America, UK, whatever you call it. And these are environments where credit score is of essence. So if you go into any country, you can't do anything without credit score. And so I was asking myself, so all this while I've been borrowing money or using consumer loans in Nigeria, paying my rent, paying everything for the past 15 years is nothing. So imagine, so what kind of fintech can gather such data and partner with some fintech in those countries and see how they can give me a credit score that is acceptable in those countries? So when I move, so those are the kind of innovations, that we are looking for in fintech startups, on the continent, in partnership with companies globally as well. Thank you.
No, great perspective, and it's unique that it's coming from that VC or the investor perspective. So I appreciate that because you're looking at it through a very different lens. And I love that concept with regards to the credit score, something I would have never even thought of. Being in the Western world, and how important that is. So thank you for that. Riz, could we maybe move to you to provide your perspective either on Jabril's comments or the question itself?
So Scott, I'll give you a response on the question you asked, and I'll give you two different perspectives in terms of what am I looking forward to in terms of innovations or advancements in space. And I'll give you two perspectives. One is that of with the real life example of the SADC region, the South African Development Community, a project called Transaction Clearing on Instant Basis, which is a project that is essentially bringing together of 14 different regulators, 14 different countries in the region to ensure that any type of payment can be cleared on an instant basis. The project has been alive for a few years, I believe since 2016, 17. And you can imagine the complexity of not just satisfying one regulator, but 14 regulators to ensure that what you're trying to do is going to work, right? So the complexity piece, and I hope, and I'm positive, obviously optimistic, that could be a project that kind of blossoms into something bigger across Africa, because GMAC, which is the Western African Hemisphere, is doing something similar. The Eastern African ecosystem is doing something similar. Now, when I really want to look at innovation or what the 10 years will look like, I turn to my 12-year-old son, because all the payment experts and the gurus around the world and the pundits can't really tell me what's going to happen tomorrow, because they still have their previous 20 years of experience to leverage to see what they see the future to be. But my 12-year-old has a very different perspective. His perspective is, I can sit on my iPad or my computer and I can play games with my friends in any part of the world. I can transfer points or Robux or things to them instantly so they can buy that new avatar that they want to, or the skins as they call them in the gaming community, right? So they can wear their new skin and show up into the battlefield and we can go on an adventure hunt. For him to have the idea to go to a bank branch to request a payment or to log into an app, then to register a beneficiary, and then to send money is alien. They just don't have the patience. If you cannot engage them through the technology and through the user interface and user experience and fulfill their needs, they're going to abandon your service. I think we all talk about, Ubers of the world and Airbnbs of the world, the fact that the millennials made these brands to what they are today. My son educated me that he's part of Generation Alpha. He's not a millennial or Generation Z. He's Generation Alpha because he's born in 2010, right? So I think, I go back to the point that, Gaurav was making, which is the speed, the reliability, innovation in these areas, innovation in the sense that you can transfer funds fast. It can be reliable. So you don't have to look back and sort of try to validate has the payment received the recipient or not. Reducing the cycle times, using AI and machine learning for the compliance elements to make sure the screening processes can be done faster. And there's a predictive model that if there's a return customer, you don't make them go through the same hoops again and the OTPs and the validations to do the same thing if you already have that predictive analysis and modeling done to ensure that the payment can be done seamlessly. So I think for me, the innovation really, Scott, again, the phones were invented by Graham Bell, but if you ask a 12-year-old today, he's going to say Steve Jobs invented the telephone and it's Apple, right? That's what they know. So it's about really, and Apple comes up with innovations. Are they really innovations? They're updates, right? And that goes back to the point that Gaurav and Sanjay both were making, that build on something that exists today instead of starting from scratch. There's plenty of examples around the world. There are markets that are similar in nature in terms of their demographics, in terms of their economies, in terms of their dependencies on the US dollars, in terms of their dependencies on remittances. Solve the problems if they have been managed at a domestic level, leverage that to take it to the next level. I think like Gaurav said, again, CBDCs are something also that's going to be really exciting to see how the sovereignty of payments for each market is going to be leveraged and made into an important element when trading, when dealing with payments, whether it's for trade or any other purpose. So I think those are the 2-3 areas of innovation that I'm really looking, sort of keeping my eyes open to. But like I said, my son gives me a lot more inspirations every morning, because the access to information these kids have today is probably more in depth and more real time than we would probably pay consultants to go research and then give us the report of something that we already knew.
It's a great perspective. It's kind of like asking your child about a cassette or a VHS tape. They'll look at you like you're crazy, right? So we're looking at this new generation who spends 95% or more of their time on their mobile device, right? And that just lends itself to everything that's been shared thus far. It's speed, it's accessibility, it's closing the loop entirely around the globe. And that, is not just from a communication perspective, but relationships as well as payments. So that's great points. Sanjay, do you want to weigh in with some thoughts?
Yeah, I like to add, what the Jubril has said, about the Alipay experience and the way the Alipay has grown, but see, I see slightly differently, as I said earlier, in the payment space, if you have to grow, then the whole payment ecosystem have to be ubiquitous. It has to be API driven, open source. And that is a way where it could be a low cost, high availability, scalable. All those things would be there. I share my experience of in our country when NPCI set up a switch, which is called switch of switches, and 10, 12, 15 years I was the CFO there. And I saw how the transactions of ATM and the cost of ATM, has come down, and how the ATM has grown, in the last from 2004 to 2012, 13, right? And the cost of expanding it was very low, right? Then comes the instant payment, in the country when IMPS came, it has certain issue of MPAN and all those things, the user friendly, but it has instant payment, Then over it, the UPI came, which gives you a, the unique address, and underneath there is a layer of your all banking details are there, and everything is there, and that's where it has expanded to all banks, all regional rural banks, all RRB, all cooperatives. There are almost, with NPCI now, there are almost 800 banks, which are within its network. A small cooperative bank can also provide the mobile payments to its customer, which was earlier not possible. So in India perspective, I can say that there are certain public good infrastructure which has been created, like Aadhaar is there, like your UPI is there, like your consent arrangement is there, like latest is the payment aggregator, so that helps us, as Jubril has said, gives us the whole detail of the of anybody's to do the credit rating, data aggregator, payment aggregator, kind of a the entity which has set up, and it is mandatory for all to report the transactions to them. So these are the public good infrastructure which is there. Now over it, the fintechs are there, which are innovating the new use cases. And let me tell you, the cost of transactions within India is almost zero. The cost of transaction is very, very low. The UPI is 8 billion transaction in a month. So cost has automatically come down. So now when we take it to the cross-border payments, I think there has to be something, not to indulge with the local payments. Let the local real-time payments have it, and there has to be some kind of a hub and spoke model where which can specify the messaging standards and all protocol, chargeback, refund, and all those things. So that is where, and the cost of integrating one ISP with another ISP would be very low, So once you connect with the central network, you can connect with all ISP, So once the architecture problem gets solved, the all other problem of compliance, cost, speed, everything will get resolved. So I think the fulcrum of the cross-border payment would be going forward would be some kind of, I think I've seen some Nexus project is there, I think in Singapore and some other places, where they are primarily working on the instant payment, and next come the CBDC, which will also roll out, 50, 60 countries are working on it, I think these are the two areas where the real innovation and a new solution will come in the near future.
Thank you. That's yeah, it's a great perspective, and I think that from the banking angle, if you will, looking more globally at the innovations, and I know that India is definitely going to have a great influence on where we're headed, and how such a mass variation of different consumers are using different technologies will start to influence where the direction is headed. Gaurav, before we moved on to the next question, do you have a comment to share, perspective perhaps?
Yeah, I'll just quickly jump in, right? I mean, when we talk about innovations, I think CBDCs, cross-border payment security, compliance, unified payments, and so on and so forth. And we discussed the buy now, pay later, the credit transfer, a lot of interesting things are happening. And I loved Riz's comments on ask your child, how does he see it? Ask the guy who mows your lawn, or ask the guy who's driving the bus, what does he want, right? Sanjay spoke very interesting. The cost of payments is absolutely zero. But when I go talk to a bank to negotiate that payment in India, bank says, pay me 12 rupees for that local payment from a cross-border standpoint. So there is a mismatch, right? Everybody's here to make money. It's costs nothing, but everybody wants to make money. So really, really, I think the new solutions, the new innovations in that sense of the world is all about, I would say, I think both Sanjay and Jabril and all three of the panelists touched upon is, and I probably want to coin a term, or, if there is a term called intelligent payments or intelligent transactions, right? Now, what is an intelligent transaction? An intelligent transaction is a peer-to-peer payment. We all have heard about this payment. Now, if I really look at my balance sheet of payments in a day, the world has become so trustworthy for the most part that really don't need to negotiate stuff anymore, right? I buy groceries, I don't negotiate anything. My utility payments, I never negotiate. My payments to school, for my kids, no negotiations there. So these are all payments which are already there in the system, and I have to make it every month, right? When I'm going through the tolls, payments, these payments are automated, right? The services that comes, the utilities that I use in my house, right? Now, can all this not be automated? An intelligent payment. I don't even have to bother about it. As long as I have the balance or the credit, it just happens, right? At whatever cost, at whatever speed, at whatever time, through whatever mode, right? It could be for my bank account sitting in the United States, or could be my bank account sitting in Dubai, or my bank account sitting in India. It should be able to take care of things. Now, that's probably where the future of payments is, right? Where in my refrigerator or my air conditioner, the gas is automatically low. There is a sensor that captures that, sends a message to the service provider. The service provider comes, does it, and boom, my account is debited because it's all pre-negotiated. I don't really have to think about these things, right? Which is where, I can focus my energies as an individual on something else, probably saving the cost of the transaction further down. really in a cross-border payment for a small payment, if you walk around in Dubai or in United States, Scott, you would know how much that would cost. But, we're really looking at sometimes an ACH payment costing $15, right? I mean, that's hilarious. $15 for an ACH payment. Like, in Bank of America can get away with shit like that. I'm sorry, right? And a local payment from here, Dubai, to a country like, Pakistan or India or Nepal, God, $20, 20 dirhams. Seriously, and within like, what are we really talking about? These are payments which everybody makes on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. Everybody knows the predictability of it, and still we can't do anything about it, right? That's where the innovation comes in. So I think the real question we need to ask is innovation versus money making. What do you want to do? You want to make money? You want to make an innovation? If you really want to innovate, you go down that path. In the money. So I'm just going to pause right there and let that sink in. But those are the ones which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, Scott, if you don't mind me just chipping in, so sorry. So
please,
amazing.
Yeah.
Two things. Hope you all know that everything we've said will be driven by AI, probably ChatGPT for sure, right? Definitely. Credit score is not going to be me. It's going to be just the AI will just have the algorithm, and that will go. But the other part I want to point out is the cost of transaction. Now, the reason why the costs are actually going up, it is because of the evaluation metrics. And again, you will see why Twitter also is now charging $8 for verified check. Meta also is introducing $9 $12. So Netflix is also increasing their own cost. Let me explain why. I'm sure we all know, just to say, is that before now, the concentration was on the numbers of customers you can gather and the volume on transaction. So the metrics of the multiple of the valuation is on the top level revenue collections. But now investors are now asking fundamental questions: free cash flow, not adjusted EBITDA. Free, how much? Dollars, where's the money? So therefore, people have to go back and say, you know what, instead of trying to get 10 million customers, I want 1 million customers and pay me my $50, right? And that is what is happening, because the way you value a company in a private market is completely different from the public market. And the example is Robin Hood as well, right? So those are the kind of things that are happening. Investors too are trying to get involved and say, I want my money back like now. And yeah, of course, that will also kill innovation, but I'm sure we'll find a way around it. Yeah. Thank you.
No, that's a great point. Jerry Maguire comes up again. Show me the money, right? And that's you're absolutely right. That's where it's at. Sanjay, I think you had a comment as well that you wanted to share, right?
Yeah, I'll just add what Gaurav said. Sometimes I
Please.
see this cost of transaction is primarily not the cost, but the cost of inefficiency in the system, right? Let's say a cross-border transaction, there are two ways of settling it, one is called the SMS transaction or the DMS transaction, if it is a card scenario, right? So if it is a DMS transaction, the acquirer can, at any point of time, 7 days, 15 days, 30 days, they can put up a transaction for the settlement, right? So what happens? Who will bear the forex cost for that 7 days, 10 days, 20 days, whenever the acquirer will put up those, put the transaction for the settlement, So the whole, this whole payment system, I'll say, still working. What has been designed 10, 20, 30 years back, settlement. And this is not the cost of transaction, this is the cost of inefficiency, which is built up into the whole system,
Yeah, that's a great point. Why don't we kind of continue that thread, Sanjay, if you don't mind? I'm just going to ask one last question before we move into the next section of the session itself, to be respectful of everyone's time. So what could be the biggest hurdles, in your opinion, in the adoption of innovation solutions within this space? I think it's a nice extension of the conversation we've been having for the last 5 minutes or so. And Sanjay, I'll hand it over to you.
See, the biggest hurdle again, I would say the first one, which I have explained at, shared at that point in time, is the design part. If we design part has, see, in a what you say, any cross-border transaction or even in a domestic transaction, if we set our design, the formatting, message formatting set, probably that would be the biggest hurdle going forward to scale it up further. Second, most important is the pre-validation of the payment instrument, See, like domestic payment, I know some of the payment systems are where there is a pre-validation. So I know the payment which is sending, I am sending to the receiver or the payee's details are pre-validated, Whereas in cross-border also, if the new solutions are coming where there is a pre-validation, screening is provided, The third one provide the, the payee's functionality. What happens that I make the payment and its confirmation may come after some time, after 1 hour, 2 hours, and it depends upon whether the pre-screening or sanctioning of that particular account or that particular bank, is there or not. So these are the few things, which I think are the biggest hurdle in the cross-border transaction, and these can all be addressed through the proper design aspect.
No, that's a great perspective. Riz, would you like to weigh in with your thoughts on that?
Sure, Scott, I'll try to be as brief as possible. Again, knowing that we need to look at the demo also and critique what you and Dan have been doing as well. Right? So I want to leave some steam for that as well. I think in terms of hurdles, I think, Scott, one thing that I would say is that acknowledging the fact that you can't do it all by yourself.
Yes.
So don't try to lead innovation when you don't even know where to start. Go to your core, leverage your core, collaborate with people who are doing it better than you could, understand the dynamics, and adoption becomes easier. So acknowledging the fact that you can't do it on your own is the number one hurdle to come. The second is looking at, and what Jabril and Gaurav also said, do you want to really make a difference or do you want to make a buck? What you have to balance that out culturally in terms of your operational efficiencies and operating model to say that if I can make a difference and build scale, I will build legacy. But if I want to chase the unicorns, and I'm surprised nobody's mentioned dragons yet because it's the year of the dragon, I guess. We're not chasing unicorns anymore. We want to be dragons, right? So, if that's the inspiration, then you have to really think about, are you really driving innovation? Or are you doing a Me Too model of building a business and just bringing the customer base and monetizing it, getting your valuation up, and one fine day, laying off 50% of your workforce?
That's a great point. And then that's something we're seeing a lot of, especially in the last 12 months, right? Before we move on, Gaurav, do you have a thought on that you'd like to add?
Points are very well covered. It's really about, just tracking down for me who are you going to be servicing, right? And then picking up that thread and seeing who are the participants in that thread, and really to Sanjay's point on the ecosystem, which ecosystems will come into play, and what value you're bringing it back to the guy who you actually thought you would help out in your business model. For me, if we're able to do that, then it used to cost billions for NASA to send that rocket to space, right? Elon Musk did it at a much cheaper cost. India did it at a further cheaper cost. So it's really about, nothing wrong with NASA, but it's really about who you're trying to help, what you're trying to do. And if it's possible, if you can put people in space at that cost, at that lower cost, then sure, why not payments? The other thing is, for me, it's all about the mindset. As we kind of go into the payments world, the mindset and the priorities, it's so hard to have everybody on the same set of priorities. Countries have different priorities, fintechs have different priorities, investors have different priorities, entrepreneurs have different priorities. And then the business in itself has different priorities. I can sit here, talk all about sustainability, but I get, when I stand in front of my shareholders, he's asking me what's my profitability, and I got to answer that question first. So that drives my behavior towards my consumer. Hypothetically, we can talk about anything, but realistically, we got to keep the mindset in the mind and see where that goes. Right. So I think the biggest hurdles would also, one of the biggest hurdles is also, the open-mindedness on some of these other subtle points. And that would drive a really, robust model forward. But I'd like to go back to, Riz's comments. When I talk to my kids, they have a very different perspective on what I have. And when I talk to my dad, he has a completely different perspective. So I would say that while I think future would be X, Y, or Z, the minute my kids come into the world of economy and become economic contributors, they would be driving that vision forward. And that's going to be very different than what I have ever even imagined. Because the way these guys collaborate is very different. They are not coming from a scarcity point of view. The whole world has already moved in terms of, where they are in terms of, the basic resources. Out of the 7 billion people, more than 4 to 5 billion people are already above that level. So the problems are going to be solved very differently now. So those are just some of my thought processes around how the future might look like and how we can achieve that.
Yeah, no, I think that great perspective from all three of you so far on that. I mean, I think it's furthering that perspective of open sourcing, right? Of innovation, of transparency, but also a completely different view on know your customer. It's know your audience, right? Know your clientele, but give them that opportunity to really provide you that input that's critical to giving them what they're looking for, which is very different today than it was a year ago, than it was 10 years ago, and that it will be 5 years from now. So great perspectives. Jubal, unless you have a thought on this, I'll hand it back over to Pankaj to move to the next perspective.
I'd like to make a quick comment, if I might, as I listened to the panelists. It became
I'm
clear
okay.
to
No
me
comment.
it became clear to me that the overarching question for all of us is to look at the innovation and to look at the money-making prospect from two perspectives. The first is from the macro perspective. How did the geopolitical and the legacies of the incumbents affect the marketplace? And the second is that from the micro level, what does the customer really want? The size of the small businesses or the individual? And there's clearly friction in that. And part of the solution, as you've all alluded to, is in the technology, is in how AI is going to be a component. It's a really interesting space to be in. And so I took a lot from the panels. I wanted to thank you all for that.
Jeffrey?
Likewise, appreciate the dialogue and the input and perspective. So thank you. Pankaj, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, no, I think this was fantastic discussion, very insightful, and I could see the passion in the insights that were shared by our panelists. And I think I could have continued with this discussion for hours and hours, but I know we have to move on to the next segment of the event, which is roast session, which is equally exciting from my perspective, because I like to see founders getting some brutal feedback from the experts, from the industry leaders. So yeah, and again, why we love this, segment of the event, because most of the times founders are not able to get that brutal, honest feedback. Most of the times they get sugar-coated BS or just complete silence. And that's why we want to make sure that we are able to learn from experts, we are able to improve and grow. So Scott, please share your screen, take us through the presentation, and let's get some real feedback.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to have Dan walk us through this presentation, which will take about 4 minutes or so. And then I'll segue over to a quick view into our platform itself from a user perspective. Dan? You're on mute, Dan.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Welcome everybody to Steamchain. What we've done at our company is solve the problem of high international currency conversion cost, uncontrolled currency fluctuation risk, and unnecessary labor costs for any company that are making or receiving international B2B payments. Now, our vision is to disrupt the global Swiss system by reimagining the methods by which international FX payments are made through digitization. So here's the problem, and it's a big one. Currency conversion, as you all know, is expensive, costing from 5 to 11% or more, and that's according to the World Bank. Fluctuation risk can lower the bottom line, and that's according to a survey by HSBC. And Maersk and IBM estimate that 20% of the cost of international shipping is related to antiquated billing processes. Now, the global market is huge for international trade. Every day, there are thousands of companies making millions of payments, incurring billions of dollars in wasted fees. Now, what we've done at Steamchain has created a simple-to-use platform where clients can create their own payments, and our platform automatically executes those payments, settling in the currency of their choice, and that's on a global basis. Now, our solution can reduce the currency fluctuation costs up to 100%, and the currency conversion costs up to 80%, and the labor costs up to 20%. But most importantly, we can increase the bottom line for our customers. Now, our solution is cost effective. We charge from 1 to 2% per transaction, as opposed to the much higher rates that companies currently pay. The best part of this is that our fee is paid at the time of the transaction, which makes us a cash business. Now, we have two options on our platform. The first option leverages our strategic FX partners, Corp, which is headquartered in Toronto, Canada, traded on the New York Stock Exchange, FacilitaPay, located in Brazil, and OFX, located in Australia, with offices around the world. The second model leverages our global digital asset exchange partners. Now, the transfer of the payments takes less than 60 seconds, and the settlement of those payments to anybody can take less than a couple of hours. Now, we provide access to over 200 countries and more than 150 currencies. We have 4 patents that are pending, spanning multiple technology area, and they've been independently valued at $2.8 million. Now, we're growing our business through direct customers and through a go-to-market strategy that focuses on channel partners as well. We have billion-dollar companies using our platform. OIA Global is an interesting company. We're saving them as over 11% on their currency conversion and transaction fees. Now, we can beat the competition because of our strong value proposition of saving time, labor costs, and money. If you take a look at this competitor slide, it's really simple. We have our competitors have higher fees, longer transaction times, less flexibility. So simply put, our solution is cheaper, faster, smarter, and more efficient than the competition. So I want to thank you all for taking a look at our company, and we look forward to working with you on projects moving forward.
Let's see here.
Questions?
Yes.
Gaurav, please go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to jump right in. This is my favorite subject. I've done this for a very long period of time, both as a provider. Second, when I was working for Ripple, I used to work with practically every PSP out there. And third, as a consumer, because so NetSense is a global crypto payment gateway, right? So I deal with merchants in 47 different countries. You can imagine if I need to create a payout file to 47 countries, what that might look like on a daily basis. It's a growing business. So one of the key questions that I have is obviously, and I'm going to be not sugarcoating, is your payout partners. So your business model is dependent on your payout partners, right, Dan?
That is correct. And as you saw, we have two sides of the business. And we did that from a strategic perspective, because when you take a look at businesses, many of them are reluctant at this stage of the game to move into the crypto space and into the use of stable coins, for example. So we've created a platform that has a gateway both to the FX side of the business and to the digital asset side of the business, which facilitates the payments that we make. And both are a little bit, the user perspective is both the same, but behind the scenes, the methodology is a little bit different. And Scott can drill down a little bit further on that as we go through the demonstration of the product. The final thing I'd like to say about that is that our strategic partners, be they the FX providers and or the digital asset exchanges, they're the ones that handle all of the compliance issues, as do we, but from their perspective, they're the ones that are handling the money. So Steamchain does not take possession of our clients' money in any sort of way, which has saved us a tremendous amount of money on a global basis. As you know, the licensings around the world can be very, very expensive. So that was all by design from our perspective.
My question, Dan and Scott, is from a very corporate consumer, B2B consumer standpoint. So if I were to transfer my business over to you, right? I mean, I work with a couple of payment service providers to take care of my global payments, right? So if I were to move it over to you, the first thing that hits me is the list, not only which is your list, but also the list of your partners or categories of customers that you don't want to handle, right? That's straight off the bat business that I cannot give you, right? And there are challenges around that. Now, the second thing is, does your payout channels support payments that have originated in crypto to other businesses? That's second. Third is, if we add these two up, right? How many local currencies can you help us really do a business payment to, keeping the first two parameters in mind, right? And I'm making this a real world problem. I'm not giving you any conceptual basis, because this is the problem that, I'm not saying this is a problem that I have. This is a problem that I face every now and then, wherein, say, for example, a Burgess Yachts, who is one of the world's largest yacht company, is one of, wants to receive payment, and their customer is selling a 25 million yacht in Bitcoin through me. And this is just a use case. This is, and if I have to transfer that money, can you support it? Like, that's a straight up question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And payout could be in 15 different countries.
Yeah, so I can start with the last question and work my way back up, because I would like you to, if you could, unpack the first question just a little bit more, because I wasn't quite sure if I understood that one. But simple answer to question number 3, does our platform support the ability to move from crypto to a fiat currency, or even fiat currency to a crypto? Oh, go ahead.
No, my question was, if the payment,
yeah.
My platform does the crypto to fiat transfer, right? Yep. But I need to pay out the merchant, let's say, sitting in London, whose business, who's invoiced and now receiving dollars now. A lot of times when I do this transaction, because of the nature of the business or nature of the transaction that there was crypto involved, the last mile connectivity of the bank says, this is crypto, I'm not going to credit this fund. That's my question.
Yeah, and that definitely is a challenging one. I'm not going to say that we have the answer to every one of those, to be very frank and transparent. However, we're continuing to evolve and innovate on the platform. So we have the capability right now to go from crypto to crypto, i.e. wallet to wallet. We have the ability to go from bank to bank. What we do not have today, and this is really, the tail wagging the dog, if you will, is the ability to move from a wallet to a bank directly. And no regulation is allowing that to occur at this point in time, i.e. the ability for an individual with a wallet to pay another individual's bank directly. That's compliance related. So what we are developing is a variety of additional strategic partnerships, for example, with one of the largest credit cards in the world, to be able to offer a hybrid solution that allows a bank or even a wallet to a wallet or a bank, or even a debit card or an e-wallet, so that there's a lot more flexibility in the capability set of our platform. This is also one of the reasons why we have multiple FX providers. Not one is created equal to the other. They all offer different capabilities with regards to where they're licensed, where they are compliant, where they have the capability to onboard a client in a particular region or even a country. So by adding 3, and we're adding a 4th now, it gives us global reach to be able to onboard clients through appropriate compliance, AML and KYC processes, and enable them as a client to be able to use our platform as that gateway, so to speak, to pay out, to another part of your question, to recipients in any one of 200 countries and 150 different currencies directly to their banks.
Yeah, let's maybe have a separate conversation, because I do want to take a deep dive into how our businesses can align with each other.
Absolutely.
We have created, because NetSense is also a Canadian stock exchange and a New York Stock Exchange listed payment service business. Think of us as a network international, or or for crypto to fiat world, we do the bridge. But I think to Riz's earlier point on the liquidity, that's always going to be a challenge when you kind of touch the crypto markets. And for sub 50K transactions, nobody's going to bat an eyelid. But the minute you start about getting serious businesses, like $1 million worth of payments per transaction, now you're having serious issues in terms of payouts, or payouts being even supported. So yeah, all these are real life problems that, at least I face or we have solved for. But yeah, I would be happy to pick your brains as to where we can align on some of these things.
Gaurav, since you're based in
Absolutely.
Dubai, we should meet up also, because I think I have a few answers to your problems. But let me just come back to Scott and Dan.
Please.
So Dan, you mentioned that the businesses that are creating the payments, right? They can use the platform to create the payment, which is then picked up by one of your partners for the FX piece and then the termination piece. In terms of debiting that customers or the business's account, in terms of pulling the funds, how does that then trigger?
Yeah,
So
it's,
go ahead. Go ahead, Scott.
Depending on the side of the business, I'll start with the FX side of the business, because it is the most streamlined. We have direct API connectivity to each of our FX partners, and we choose the FX partner as a match to a client based on the location where they reside, where that particular client has a bank, their origin currency, and then to whom and which countries and country currencies are they making payments. With the answers to those questions, we pair an FX provider to a client. So there's complete transparency from the client perspective, that they know not only who will be managing, if you will, their transaction for them, but they also have a relationship because of the transparency that we move forward to enable with our clients. That said, that FX provider, once the client accesses their encrypted account on our platform, creates a transaction. They're not only seeing live FX rates, but they also know that that FX rate, refreshed every 30 seconds, has a flat transaction fee applied to it that we have also negotiated with them up front. And as Dan had presented, it ranges between 1% and 2%. That is also based on the currency, the level of pain that they're experiencing today, and the currency they're making a payment into. That dictates that percentage. Now, they'll create they being the client, creates a transaction. The FX provider of choice will pull those funds either via wire or IACH directly from that client's bank. convert that currency through their own liquidity, and then settle that payment with the recipient directly to their bank. On the digital asset side of the business, that client that we onboard, we will also help open an account directly with one of our 7 strategic partners. That a wallet account is connected to their bank, and they manage that themselves, moving funds in real time between their bank and their wallet. They can then see exactly what amount of funds in what denominations, whether it even be crypto or fiat currency, they have within their exchange accounts. And I'll show you in a moment when I give you a view into the platform, so that they know they have ample funds to create a transaction. Once they do the transaction in the same manner as I just described, our platform programmatically taps their wallet, converts their fiat currency into a stable coin for a period of 10 seconds. In this particular case, it's a vehicle for conversion, in this case, USDC, because of the liquidity and the security and the stability of one-to-one back into the US dollar, and immediately converts that stable coin then for the preferred fiat currency that the recipient would like to receive payment in, and executes that payment and settlement to that recipient. So that's a description, if you will, at a high level of either side of the business. The two do not cross over because of the use of blockchain for the immutability of transactions on the digital asset side of the business, and then the infrastructure integration we have with our FX partners on the other side of the business being a little more quote unquote traditional.
Yeah, question right there. So so say for example, we're doing this transaction from a US to Philippines, right? A payout is in Philippines pesos. The bridge currency is USDC. Now, first question, is it ERC20 or Tron?
Good question. ERC20 is the foundation on which our architecture is built.
Got it. So there is a gas fees involved, right?
Yes.
Which is much higher than the other one now. But when you still do the bridge between the two, you would need liquidity pools on either side of the equation to solve for, so you do a US dollar to USDC, USDCs to USDT from an exchange standpoint, and then it kind of liquidates that into a PHP. So
Yes.
do you foresee, like, when the volumes kind of increase, having liquidity crunches? Because some of the other players definitely hit that very hard, and with USDC kind of moving about 10 to 15 basis points up and down, that kind of puts the pressure back on service providers like you. So I'm sure those would be some of the questions as you kind of go towards your B2B players, because then the volume of the payments kind of increases.
Yeah, and that's a great call out, and it's a very astute one at that. So we've been very selective and strategic in the partners, the digital asset exchange partners that we've selected. One of the criteria is exactly what you just noted, Greg, and that is liquidity, but also accessibility to fiat currencies, and they are unique to the client, but also the recipients. What we also then do to ensure there are no liquidity challenges during a transaction is that we're managing a rolling 2-month forecast with our clients, because the majority of their payments, as you all well know better than even I, are very they're planned, right? That some of them are also regular or repeatable on a monthly or a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. So they're able to give us a foreshadow, if you will, or a forecast of upcoming payments over a rolling 2-month period. We provide that information to our exchange partners on the basis of those clients to ensure that there aren't any liquidity gaps, if you will, or shortfalls.
Fantastic. No, that's amazing. I mean, those were.
Sanjay, sorry, I think Sanjay had a question.
Yeah, Scott, when the platform which you have shown is when the remittance or when the payment comes, so do the merchant have the various options or the competitive bit of the FX partners, or he can choose, who is providing the best conversion rate? Is that there on the platform?
Interesting. Yeah, so it is very transparent on the platform. And maybe this is a good segue. If everybody doesn't mind, I'll just share my screen quickly and give you a quick view into what the platform looks like from a user perspective, which will help visually answer the question that you're asking, Sanjay. Please let me know if you don't see my screen. So there's 2 views or 2 sides of the platform that we've shared already. I will note that what you're looking at here is on version 2, and the usability and the view has been and continues to be innovated on based on our clients' use of this. What do they want to see? What do they don't want to see? How can they get in, get out as quickly as possible, but have the most valuable information available to them? So we have a direct API link, for example, to the European Bank for this currency FX rate, which is displayed here and refreshed every 3 minutes. You have the ability to adjust your base currency. And as you do so, it's real time, gives you that exchange rate. So you can get a quick snapshot of what the FX rates are today, unbiased by any type of financial institution overhead. This is literally a one-to-one FX rate, which is also the backbone behind the platform itself, which will help answer part of your question, Sanjay. Clients, if they have exchange accounts, when they land on their account, you can see here, this is the crypto gateway half of our platform. You can see here from a one-stop shop perspective exactly what the balance is with any of your exchanges. And you have the ability as a user to access directly, let's say into Kraken, and make or process a payment utilizing or sourcing from any one of these currencies out to your recipients. Now, as you move over to the other side of the equation, the FX gateway itself, you have the ability here in a very simplistic way to be able to use drop downs to create transactions, as I'm doing right here, originating from, let's say, Australian dollars. You can change here to use whatever currency you would like to originate a transaction and make a particular transaction occur. Also, you have the ability here, oh my gosh, of course, I've had this open for too long and now it needs to be refreshed. One moment. Let's see here. Sorry, 1 second. Let's get out of that one. Okay, let's come over here. Okay, so booking a deal, for example, on the FX Gateway, you have a drop-down selector here where you've defined your own beneficiaries in a way that has entered all of their banking information. You've been able to label them, if you will, so it becomes a very easy, quick process to say, look, I'm going to make a payment to ABC Corporation in Canada. You can adjust the currencies to be able to make that transaction occur. And let me refresh this, because it's always going to be a scenario where I prepare and then I have it. There we go. Okay, so let's do this one more time. We're going to make a transaction occur to a particular recipient in Australia from the drop down. Okay, I had left it open too long while we were in the live panel, so I apologize. You can see here that the live conversion rate is tied over here, but it's being fed, and every 30 seconds, this conversion rate, in this particular case, USD to Australian dollars, is refreshing as I speak to you. You can adjust the amounts. You can, have different ability here to change the amounts that that you're going to be making a payment. You can say, for example, if this conversion rate is acceptable to you now, you can process this deal or book it, or you can come back later. If I book this deal, it captures and locks that FX rate. You then have the ability to change your payment methods. You can make a payment comment here to tie it back to an invoice number. You have the ability to use a drop down to select the reason for the particular payment. You have the ability to select your settlement account and then submit, and the platform will give you a confirmation that this particular transaction has been confirmed, provide you with a summary of it here that incorporates all the information that you've just walked through, and then within 2 minutes or so provide you with an encrypted email that provides you with a transaction receipt that gives you multiple capabilities to download it, forward it as an email to your recipient, send it as an Excel or a CSV file to your finance department. So it's very robust from a user perspective. You then also have the ability to access all of your past orders that are captured here and stored within your account. You can select one that was from, let's say, July of last year. When did I send it? What were the amounts? You can then download this or forward it again if you need to. You also have the user ability to manage all of your beneficiaries. By selecting one, you have the ability here to delete them or to make an edit, or even under all beneficiaries, you can add a new one. So it's very user controlled, if you will, and simple to use. And I'll kind of pause there to see if I've answered questions, but given you also at the same time a view into the platform itself and how it's being used.
See, Scott, I was looking at, as a merchant, when I initiate a payment, because you have a multiple FX partners, is there a facility that there is a, the competitiveness in the FX partners to give the best rate, that option comes, because here I see only one option, which is the existing conversion rate, I'm looking for multiple options by different FX partners, and just to see which best rate I'm getting from which FX partner.
Yeah, Sanjay, this is a really good question. And yes, we do have the capability in this particular demo. It does not reflect, unfortunately, the ability to select different FX partners. However, depending on the client and their needs, whether they be unique and singular or global and diverse in nature, we do onboard those clients with, in those cases, if they're the latter, multiple FX partners, and it will display here where they can rotate, if you will, or pivot between different FX partners to see what spot market rate they have. They will already know, however, in advance what their fee is, and we'll have that same fee structure the same across both FX. So to your point, they'd be able to say, okay, let me check A or B, and then if B is more cost effective or has a preferable FX rate, they can run with them.
Yeah. So my next question is, related to this, in the whole payments channel, payment transaction, who are the other intermediaries? For the pay side, the PSP would be some bank, right? And how it get integrated? It get integrated with the FX partner, or the client at the the pay and the PSP, the FX partner, and then Steamchain, and then this side, the merchant and the sender, the PSP this side. So there are about roughly 3 plus another 2, 3, 5, 6 entities are there. Is this the flow is, or is there is a different flow, and you have a direct integration with the PSP here?
So we have a direct integration, which is done in a way that eliminates the additional parties, which in traditional cases are layering additional fees, time, and cost.
Yes.
So our endeavor here is to shrink that in both dimensions, both X and Y, as well as vertically and horizontally, if you will, so that there's only one entity in this particular case. And that is, in this view, you have our FX partner pulling funds directly from our client's bank, providing the currency conversion, and then the direct settlement to the recipient's account. That's only one party that's involved if you don't include ourselves in that scenario, because we don't touch those funds.
Okay, and is that FX partner charges some integration cost initially, or no?
No, they do not. That's part of our strategic partnership with them, is that there are no integration fees, and what we pass along to our client is only a flat transaction fee rate on each transaction. We don't charge at this point any onboarding fees or any subscription fees like many of the more traditional financial institutions do. So there's additional savings for our clients.
There is no minimum yearly fee?
No, there isn't, nor do we have a minimum of the transaction size or frequency. We're really endeavoring to remove the barriers of entry. Although to that end, we are selecting clients globally that have larger needs for cross-border transaction payments. And this B2B vertical and that we're looking at endeavors to result in anywhere from 25,000 to millions in the transaction size. So we don't need to enact any type of minimum. And because of those size volumes and the flat transaction rate, our revenue stream is significant enough where at this point we're not incurring any or instituting any subscription fees.
And one last question, who takes care of the AML and compliance?
Yes, it's a shared approach where both for ourselves to be compliant, we are performing KYC and AML on every new client. And we also have that same information performed yet again by our FX partners or our digital exchange partners as an account is opened. So it's a one-time process. However, on a weekly basis, we're monitoring the bad actor reports for any type of nefarious transactions. We haven't had any to date. However, we have that instilled as a process. And if there are any red flags that are raised, then we're going to address that directly with the client, which would result in either excusing that client from use of our platform or taking next step actions.
So contractually, responsibility rests with the Steamchain of the FX partner.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Scott, just a question. Who's your, from a go-to-market perspective, who are you targeting to bring to the platform?
Yes, that's a good question. And at the same time, I'm trying to figure out, so for some reason, my screen is locked in share mode. So maybe, Pankaj, you could help me.
I'll help you with that here.
Kill my screen share for me. Thank you. I apologize. That way you're not just looking at a little thumbnail of myself. So when we went to market, our initial industry focus, because of our background collectively as founders and our networking capabilities, were global supply chain companies. And under that very large umbrella, you have logistics providers, global supply chain providers, invoice payment providers. That gave us the ability as a startup to enact and leverage our own network to be able to identify and secure and onboard clients. Also, it's, as we all well know, an industry vertical that has lean margins and constant downward pressure, especially over the last 3 or 4 years with the supply chains, COVID, et cetera, that have really challenged the industries. And so we saw an enormous amount of upside. We're successful in onboarding clients in those verticals. And since we have started to migrate to consumer products companies, as well as a variety of other companies such as online retailers out of Japan, for example, they're doing a lot of business in Africa. So we have a lot of diversity in our client base. We're also trying to be very thoughtful about how we expand. We don't want to be everything to everyone, but we want to stair step the natural progression of the ecosystem that we have, where we're starting to find inbounds from one client that we have secured under a particular vertical, making payments to another potential prospect in another vertical, and then bringing them on board, because once we have one secured client that's confident and is able to provide us with a reference, we can start to grow in that subsequent vertical.
Got it. Thank you. And during the onboarding process, like, you showed the beneficiaries, and I'm sure there's a lot more to the platform that we were able to see because of time constraints. But if I'm a business or an enterprise that signs up on your platform and comes on board, is there an opportunity for me to upload from my accounts payable, like a list of beneficiaries and details automatically loaded so I don't have to create every single one of them?
That is an amazing question. And I'll be, again, very transparent with you. As of today, no, but I'm smiling because we're getting a lot of questions from our not only existing clients, but prospective clients about doing that. As you saw, which was an astute observation, a client is able to process one transaction at a time. Yes, it is very simple, and it takes a minute once you've done it once or twice, and you're in and out. However, replicating that 50, 60, 75 times every day or every week becomes laborious. So that is next on our technology roadmap. And shamelessly, I'll make a plug for the fact that with additional investment, that's our #1 priority, if you will, for the platform.
And Scott, anybody you see as the closest competitor to what you're doing in the US market or anywhere else? Because I can give you one insight for a platform, unless there's already on your list, to kind of compare yourselves to maybe pick up a few pointers, but I'll let you say who it is.
Yeah, natural competitors are the financial banks, but who's really doing what we're doing? If you look at the FX side of our business, you have comparables from Payoneer to Wise, We consider ourselves, if you will, the B2B PayPal, of the world. But, the uniqueness of the fact that our platform has two sides to it, including both, e-wallet as well as FX, is truly unique. We haven't seen anybody else that's doing that interesting combination of overlay. And we have a moat, if you will, in the 4 patents that we have out there around the architecture to kind of fend off competitors there. But that would be how I would compare to kind of players in the
Scott,
zone.
take a look at a company called fairexpay.com, based out of
I
Florida.
have heard of them. Okay.
Have a look at them, because I think looking at your platform and what you're trying to do, yes, there are some unique aspects, but there's a lot of things that they have actually done quite well, which is again going back to Sanjay's point about seeing the various options like a marketplace. When you initiate a request for payment from, US to, let's say, UK, instead of giving you one option for the route that the transaction would take to land in the UK, it kind of gives you 5 or 6 different options, everything from Payoneer to Western Union to a crypto route, etc. It gives you the speed, FX margin, and the transaction fee. So as a business, I can see everything on one wireframe, pick the best option. The pulling of the funds is done very similar to the way you're doing it, which is through the provider or the carrier takes the payment from their account and then terminates and takes care of the liquidity, etc. So just have a look at them. I think it's because as I see and hear more from you and Dan in terms of what you're building, that's the only company that comes to my mind who's doing B2B. And Sanjay, for your benefit, they're actually doing it from India to the rest of the world. I think they've got an RBI permission as well, a license, and they're doing school payments and tuition and travel agent payments to IATA and stuff overseas.
Oh,
So
That's
very
smart.
interesting bunch of people and quite dynamic. They come from enterprise, sort of expense management solution, and wonderful people. So they have a team sitting in India and some of the co-founders sitting in Florida.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look. I have heard of them. I know that we've looked at them some time ago, but it sounds like they've evolved from what you're describing. So thank you. Yeah, we'll look at that.
Hey, I think this has been extremely enlightening discussion, and I really love the fact that all our panelists have been very generous with their feedback, with their support, and with their insights, right? So again, really appreciate everybody's time today, and I hope that we can reconnect soon to explore more opportunities to collaborate. It could be, mentoring. It could be talking about what are the potential go-to-market strategies that may help Steamchain growing in different geographies, or it could be some other opportunities that we can explore together. But again, really appreciate everybody's time today, and let's talk soon. Thank you, Riz. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Zubril, Dan, and Scott. I think you handled the event really well, and you handled questions really well. So thank you.
And Dan and Scott, please do visit Dubai. Like Gaurav and everybody else said, it's quite an exciting place. I do travel to the US quite often. I am based in Dubai. So depending on where you are, I've shared my mobile number for WhatsApp or any of the communication. I think Gaurav has done the same. So I am going to be in the US in a couple of weeks. If you're on the East Coast, fantastic. I'll get to see you. If not, I'll maybe see you soon, like Pankaj is saying. Pankaj, thanks for the opportunity once for inviting us to this thing. It's been very informative, and being in the company of people like Jibril, Sanjay, and Gaurav is a privilege because they come from, like I said in the beginning, Africa is going through a transformation. India is ahead of everybody else, like by, I think, 10 years in terms of innovation and stuff. So I think the fact that the CEO of MasterCard likes to spend more time in India speaks volumes, right? So I think it's a testimony to what the Indian payment stack is doing. And then Jibril, I think, Africa, like I said, Nigeria keeps surprising everybody. The Central Bank of Nigeria is Santa Claus. They have a trick up their sleeves every single year. right? Whether it's the currencies or stopping the remittance or doing something, building a new scheme and putting verb aside and see what happens next. So it's just a roller coaster for the Nigerian citizens.
Very true.
But look forward to being connected with you guys, obviously. And Pankaj, again, thank you very much for hosting us. And Scott, wonderful job as a moderator. And Dan, thank you so much and wish you all the best with this venture. If there's anything I'm sure our fellow panelists can do, will be our pleasure.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you,
everybody.
and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.